So we have Rachel Carter here, and she is playing the Sapphire Steel deck, and then Stephen Whitcomb on the right is playing Amber Steel. Oh, they might be the opposite?
I do see a Fortisphere, but I think it's the opposite.
Okay.
But it's okay. We're now going to see them. So I love seeing them, alter their hands here. It gives you an idea of, whether that player's, what kind of strategy they're going to pursue, whether they're happy with their opening hand. You can see Rachel's waiting for Steven to decide. Steven choosing 5 cards, clearly looking for something in the opening, and yeah.
Yeah, I think there was some Sapphire cards I saw over there on Steven's side. And I know we've talked about it before, but this altering your opening hand is such a key part of playing Disney Lorcana. And in fact, when I first started playing, I did not even realize how important that was to setting yourself up for success.
That's true. I mean, games are won or lost on the altar. How well you manage to find those cards that you want, whether you throw away cards and draw no uninkables, there's such an art to it. And so it's, the first part of the game, but it's one of the most crucial parts of this game.
You know what's really fun, Liam?
What's that?
Is playing an Enchanted Cinderella on turn 1.
That's just to have it immediately cannoned.
Yes, just to have it immediately say goodbye. That dream was not a wish that her heart made.
That's true. So Stephen here, choosing not to let that stick around, had a choice to play a Fortisphere instead to set up that item, but instead choosing to get rid of that Cinderella with her singer ability. Fire the Cannons, a fun card to be run here. Sometimes you see them in decks, sometimes you don't. Depends on if people choose to run the uninkable Boom Boom instead. But here, Fire the Cannons doing work on turn 1, followed immediately by a Smee.
Yes, and Smee, as we've talked about, is such a strong card. Coming down on turn 2, questing for 2, a 3/3 character, and it does have that little bit of disadvantage of taking damage at the end of turn if you don't have a captain. But honestly, it's not much of a disadvantage because you can still get tons of value out of Smee if you can stay on the board. So, and we have a Smee for Smee. I see your Smee and raise you a Smee.
A Smee mirror, as it were. No, great card, very well statted, and that 2 lore is very impressive on turn 2. It also, some people overlook sometimes that it can sing as well. The Amber Bare Necessities is also a card that's sometimes run in this deck, and there it is. It can be sung by Smee.
Yes.
But in this case, it looks like it's being played by Ink. Rachel getting to look at the hand here and pick a non-character card to discard.
We took away Flaversham's snacks. Yeah, Bare Necessities. This came out in set 3, I believe, and it was one of my favorite new song cards of the game. It's such a fun art piece as well, with Baloo there singing with his fruit, and it can be such a powerful card.
Yeah, so then we have a harp coming down here on Rachel's side of the board. So some of these Steel Song decks in this meta started to run a little bit more aggressive lines with cards like the Magic Harp or the Golden Harp, the Piglet, which gains 2 lore if there's 2 other characters on the board, Smee with its 2 lore. And so where Steel Song decks sometimes can be a little bit more mid-rangey, trying to build up their singers and then take control of the board in the mid-game with a lot of songs, sometimes there are more aggressive builds where players can play these large number of 2 lore characters early, and it seems like that's one of the builds that Rachel is on here.
Yeah, which is really fun to see. I like, and we've talked about this before, is how you are starting to see a little bit more variance, so there's so many different, tweaks that players can make to an ink pairing. So Steel Song doesn't look just one way. You can have a lot of different variations, and that Golden Harp, I've seen games won with that card on board.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Steven has seen the harp now. He knows that that this is an aggressive deck and it's going to be looking to pick up lore early. And Steven is not on his ideal draw here. And here we have I Let the Storm Rage On being played with Ink on Smee. That not only lets Rachel draw a card, but it also puts 2 damage on Smee. So now Smee, if exerted, is going to banish himself on his turn. Still able to do some challenging, though, and that might be what we see here.
Yeah, and I really love this from Rachel because she's able to also keep that Golden Harp on board by playing that song. So she's able to quest here for 4 and really take the lore lead here early.
Yeah, and that's something she's going to be looking to do. She knows that the longer this game goes, if we get into the end game, the inevitability is with Steven's Steel Song deck. Or I'm sorry, not Steel Song deck, but Sapphire Steel deck. We've seen if this deck gets going and it builds the engine it wants to, that it can gain 10, 15, 20 lore in a single turn.
Yes.
And so Rachel's looking to get as much lore as possible, perhaps then able to close the game out with flutes before Steven's able to set up that end game engine. Steven here, though, knowing that Rachel's going to be looking to pick up lore, trading to Smee, and passing it back to Rachel for her turn.
Yeah. I'm sure that Rachel is hoping to see some of her other singers, like an Ariel, get some more songs in hand. Speaking of which, there is our lovely Ariel, spectacular singer. And did you know that part of your world was almost cut from the movie?
I didn't.
Yes.
I'm so glad it stayed around.
Me too. And we have another shiny card. I love these enchanted. That was Along Came Zeus that she was able to pick up with Ariel's ability. Of course, Ariel allows you to look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and you can find a song card and add it to your hand. And speaking of aggressive decks,
there's that Piglet we mentioned
yes.
earlier. This Piglet gets an additional 2 lore, up to a total of 3 if you have 2 other characters in play. However, you did see that harp go into the discard pile there, and that's because the golden harp, although it's very well statted for its cost, has an ability that says if you don't play a song on your turn, you have to banish it to the end of your turn. So off to the discard pile it goes, and unfortunately that won't allow Piglet to get that 3 lore, but it's a simple matter of playing another character for it to be a 3 lore character again.
Yeah. It looks like Rachel only has 1 card left in hand. Now, in a Steel Song deck, where is the place that a player would be able to draw more cards? What is she looking for?
I mean, really, it's a whole new world is the big one you're looking for, especially with Ariel being able to sing it. That's a position you want to be in. Of course, Rachel has seen, Steven over there and knows that Steven's not on his ideal draw either, so there's always the risk of drawing your opponent into, the ideal cards that they need. But Rachel here would probably like to refill her hand. Removing that Beast Tragic Hero is definitely key to keep Steven from drawing into what he needs. But
ooh, another Ariel. This is a fantastic card. This was set 4, if I'm correct, and Ariel. Item collector, treasure collector.
Yes.
She has ward, she quests for 3, and if you have more items on your side of the board than your opponent, she gets an additional 2 lore. A really fabulous character.
Yeah, now Steven is way off of his game plan here, but playing this card on turn 6 is not a terrible option. Ariel Item Collector has an ability that says she gains an extra 2 lore if you have more items than your opponent. And in this Sapphire Steel deck, unless you're playing the Mirror or the Ruby Sapphire deck, more items than your opponent is oftentimes 1. And in this case, Ariel's going to have 5 lore, and we see a second one come out, so that's 10 lore on the board with that popsicle.
My goodness.
Steven, perhaps is able to take this game away with just these 2 characters, which is definitely not the game plan that we see from these decks, and certainly not the one that Steven thought he was playing into coming into this game.
Now we do see a Piglet challenge into Ariel and banish, which is good for Rachel, because I could just imagine a lucky dime coming down and he would have been able to quest for 20 in 1 turn.
And here we have a Hades 7-cost uninkable, which sends one of your opponent's characters into their inkwell upon playing it. So Rachel, with Lawrence there, which would have been the perfect answer, or a great answer for Ariel Treasure Collector when she is exerted, being removed, and now instead Rachel probably digging at this point, just throwing 2 damage onto Hades with Let the Storm Rage On.
There we go. We have our Cinderella coming down again, singer, and a little Robin Hood. At this point in the game, I'm not sure if that's what she wants to see, but she doesn't have much choice. Like we've talked about, her hand is just so low, and she hasn't been able to find the whole new world to refill it.
No, and at this point, Steven's starting to roll a little bit, getting more resources on the board, able to quest here for 7. The Robin Hood is nice to have on the board because it does set up the Robin Hood shift if Rachel's able to draw into it, which would be a great answer for that Ariel. But alone, these 2 are not going to be enough to deal with these 2 big threats. But that Ariel in particular is very, very dangerous with her 5 lore.
Absolutely. Hades is also just such a fun card. His art, I know that he is a lot of people's favorite villain. What about you? Is favorite villain, or do you have another?
I mean, he's way, way up there.
Up there.
Ed Wood's does just such a good job bringing him to life. And Matthew Robert Davies with the art, it just killed it.
It's amazing.
It's so good.
It makes me sad that Hades didn't get a song in the movie Hercules. I really would have loved to hear a villain song from Hades.
That's true. We'll add that Add that to the list of requests
Yes.
from Disney.
Yes, just submit that to someone.
So Hades is not only a great removal option, though, now that you mentioned it, but the stat line, that 6 in the stat line, brings it out of reach of Along Came Zeus. And so, that's one less card that Rachel's able to use to deal with Hades in one go.
Yeah, this game has swung very quickly into Steven's favor. He has 7 lore on board, which would put him, just 1 lore away from taking the win. And I'm not sure that Rachel's going to be able to find the answers here that she needs. Otherwise, Steven takes it next turn.
No, and
she knows.
That Cogsworth clinches it there. I mean, the challenging thing with Aerial Item Collector is her ward. And a lot of the removal options in many decks, unless it's mass removal like Be Prepared, but particularly in Steel decks, it's targeted removal. It's things that require you to choose a character. And Ward, of course, you can't choose that character. And so Rachel then would have to use damage, characters challenging into it, in order to do that. And when Cogsworth gives it resist 1, that requires probably a whole extra character to deal with it. It's just a lot.
It's a lot.
So, yeah.
Yep. Well, let's see if she's able to find the answers in game 2. Let's just jump right into it.
Yeah. Yeah, what a fun game. What I loved about that game is it showed the resiliency on the part of Steven, having clearly not an ideal opening hand, but able to stay in the game long enough in order to get to turn 6 when the aerials just became, a real menace.
They really did, and when there were 2 of them on the board, that was a lot. Yeah, and I think here with Rachel's deck, like you were saying last game, she does have some cards in here that can be a little bit more aggressive in the early game, and I think that may be a key here for Rachel to gain lore early in the game. What do you think?
No, I think that's right. This deck clearly wants to gain a lot of lore early. I have not seen a queen, the queen commanding presence, and so I don't know if that is a shift line she's playing where she can whole new world on turn 2. In the absence of that, it seems like what this deck wants to do is start building up characters quickly, perhaps get a harp on the board.
Piglet,
and then try to race ahead, and then later on you're using your flutes to close out the game in the latter half. But this does seem to be a more aggressive deck. We do see a couple piglets in the opening hand.
Yeah, Piglet is just such a fun card. Actually, when I was in Chicago at the Disney Lorcana Challenge in Chicago, I saw a young Illuminaire there who was doing a cosplay as Piglet. It was really fun.
That is super fun.
So we have on Steven's side a couple popsicles. Well, we do have Whole New World this time around, so that's good.
Yeah, what a fascinating hand here. So we have 2 Lucky Dimes in hand. Great card. You want them in the end game. You don't necessarily want 2 of them in your hand in the early game.
No.
They're going to be sitting there taking up space for a while. Luckily, we do have Mickey Mouse Detective, which we'll see on turn 3 probably to ramp towards that 7 ink. Again, not an ideal hand, but we do have the early game cards we want, including the Mickey Mouse Detective and a Smee, perhaps, if Steven wants to answer a Smee with a Smee. But we don't.
Nope. we want to ramp.
We want to ramp.
Yep. We want to get as much ink into our inkwell as we can and get up to those larger characters.
That's true. So this Sapphire Steel deck, oftentimes, again, we think about as an engine builder. But as we saw in the last game, there's a lot of high lore mid-game characters that this deck can use to kind of take over in the mid-game if you're not careful. And what makes that especially difficult for decks to deal with is cards like Cogsworth, which give your characters resist 1. And we do see, I think, 2 of them in Steven's hand. So getting 2 of them on the board is just a lot for any damage-based removal deck to deal with. And that could allow Steven to take the game away here once he starts getting those on the board.
Yeah, I do see he also has that Simba, which we saw earlier today in another player's deck, but it's such a great card. And then over on Rachel's side, I spied a Rapunzel in her hand, which is really great because of that Smee that takes damage each turn. It kind of sets you up for a nice play to bring Rapunzel in a couple turns later, heal Smee, keep him on the board a little bit longer to keep gaining lore. You also get the card draw off of Rapunzel's ability. So, and Steven doesn't have anything that could take Smee out right now, so having that Rapunzel there is going to be really nice for Rachel.
It is a fun little combo, and oftentimes people think about Rapunzel and trying to maximize her value, particularly in decks like Red Fossa, where you're trying to get 3 cards off of her draw. But in this case, what this does is not only net her a card, but after that she'll be sitting with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lore worth of characters on the board, which is kind of the aggressive line I think this deck wants to take. So perhaps we do see that play here, allowing Smee to stick around longer, and then getting that 1/5 Rapunzel on the board.
Yep, we see a Lawrence going into the inkwell. And Smee is actually going to challenge in with, looks like they're trying to figure out what they want to do here.
Yeah, so let's see. So, oh, no, okay, so what happened here, this is fun. Piglet is Pooh Pirate Captain.
That's
so
right.
we were
Yes,
talking about,
yes. So it doesn't take any damage.
Yeah, so that's so funny. It's not a standard captain. Oh, this one. So yeah, so Smee's ability says that if you don't have a captain on the board, he takes 1 damage at the end of the turn. And
That's
I think
right.
a lot of times in these Steel Song decks or these Sapphire Steel decks, you're just so used to not having a captain that you forget.
Yes,
Piglet's a captain.
or you have a standard, stereotypical to captain like Captain Hook or John Silver. But yeah, you can forget that Piglet is a captain there.
Yeah.
But we did still see Rapunzel. So Smee only had 1 damage on him instead of 2. So Rapunzel got to draw 1 card off of Smee, still heal him up, still keep him on the board, which is really nice. And also I want to point out that Rachel has that beautiful alternate art Rapunzel, which you can earn from the prize wall with tickets here at Disney Lorcana Challenge. And I love that she has put it in her deck. It's such a beautiful card. I love the art on it. And so besides being just a fabulous card here in her deck, really beautiful.
It is so gorgeous, and yeah, so fun interaction there. Smee, healing 1 damage off the challenge to the Mickey, and then Rapunzel coming down and healing, and now the Tinkerbell coming down, dealing 1 damage across the board to Rachel's side of the board. And Steven here is it's what we talked about earlier, is setting up these, these 2 lore characters, which are going to be very difficult to remove. And Steven's just going to be able to quest for 2, 4, 5, 6 each turn, unless Rachel's able to find some big body or, yeah, just a big body to deal with him.
Yeah. Steven's hand, he's been able to get some things off the top of his deck, but he still just has those 2 lucky dimes sitting there, as well as that Simba. And he hasn't really been able to ramp up to the point yet where he can play those.
That's true. I do think he is happy though with the board state. These are tricky threats for Rachel to deal with. We have another Rapunzel coming down here, healing Rapunzel.
Yes.
And we're able to get a look side by side of the original art with the new art.
Yes.
And see this new interpretation. Gosh, it's just a challenging position for Rachel to be in here, because what Steel Song really wants to do, in addition to this version being aggressive and getting lore early, which Rachel's managed to get a little bit of, is build up a base of singers which allow you to make maximum use of the songs in your hand and play them efficiently. And so even now, one of the outs for this deck is playing A Whole New World and then using your characters to sing songs that you draw immediately afterwards. But Rachel just hasn't been able to get the characters that she needs to stick around. Both Rapunzels can sing a few songs, but not those 5-cost songs that you really want.
Yeah, we haven't seen... I know she does have a whole new world in her hand, but we haven't seen a character yet who could sing it. And you really want to be able to sing a card like that so that you still have all of your ink available to you in order to play another card.
And
we do say that lucky dime make an appearance over here on Steven's side of the board.
All the pieces falling into place here. We have a couple high lore characters on the board. Healing that Cogsworth there with a popsicle. So it'll stay around for a bit longer. Rachel not able to challenge into it and remove them now. And gosh, it's just a challenging position for Rachel right now. Steven really in the driver's seat.
Yep. There's that Ursula Singer. So Ursula is a 2-cost and Singer 4 going into the Inkwell, because I think she just has some other cards that are maybe better value here. Like a shiny Robin Hood. I love the enchanted here.
We're seeing all the beautiful cards on the side of the board here. Robin Hood is a great card. Unfortunately, with 3 in the strength line, it's not quite what you need to deal with what's on Steven's side of the board.
That Cogsworth with the resist is just so strong.
Giving everything resist. So we are removing the Mickey Mouse.
And she's questing here with the other Rapunzel.
Just continuing to drive that lore total a little bit. And that's how Rachel's going to win this game. Needs to get lore total high enough that Flutes eventually, if Steven gets control of the board, is able to close out the game. And more importantly, it's also forcing Steven to spend resources to deal with Rachel's side of the board rather than advancing his own board state or his lore totals.
So what do you think Steven is looking here at this, where the game is the game state right now? Is he looking for a Mickey Mouse detective? Because he's got one.
not a terrible card to play. I mean, Steven is in the driver's seat here. Steven's trying to prolong things, trying to think. He is paying attention to Rachel's lore. Rachel does have 6 lore on the board, and that's a lot.
7, yeah.
7. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, sorry, that she can quest
yes.
with. I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
yes.
sorry, quest with 6. So, which is a lot. So he needs to keep an eye on that. But again, this game, if it goes long, is Steven's to win, especially with the lucky dime on the board. So I think he's hoping to draw into perhaps another aerial item collector, another high lore character that will make maximum use of that dime. But even so, Steven's happy to get like 4 lore turn in combination with the dime and another character, as long as he can keep Rachel from racing ahead of him.
Yep, we see Let the Storm Rage On, Lawrence. I can't see what else is in Rachel's hand here, but like you've talked about looking for your outs. What are some of Rachel's outs here?
Rachel doesn't have a ton.
Maybe a whole new world.
A whole new world will help you find him.
But she did have to use her ink to. That's interesting because I believe Robin Hood could have sung a whole new world, but she chose to use her ink instead.
That is true. So Robin Hood will do 2 damage on the challenge. So if Rachel manages to draw into an Along Came Zeus, which one of the Rapunzels can sing, that'll do 4 damage to the Tinkerbell, and then Robin Hood can finish it off. So that's something that she is trying to keep in mind. So Robin Hood is a great card to banish another character because not only do you get to banish the character, but Robin Hood will give you 2 lore upon doing so. So this is another great combination that you like to see in these Steel Song decks is playing a whole new world followed immediately by a Be Prepared, which not only allows Rachel to pick out one of the most threatening
Bare necessities.
cards. I'm sorry, bare necessities. Bare necessities.
There's that Along Came Zeus you're saying.
There's the Along Came Zeus, and now Robin Hood will be able to challenge into it. And so not only do we remove this card, but Robin Hood gains Rachel 2 lore off that challenge. So just a great combination here. You asked what the outs were. The outs are, it turns out, a whole new world into a Bare Necessities, into a whole Along Came Zeus with a Robin Hood challenge.
Yeah, it really was a whole new world there for Rachel on that turn.
That is true. A new fantastic point of view.
Absolutely.
So Steven now, unfortunately, when you hold New World to look for the answers, you also give your opponent a lot of answers. So Steven, perhaps found one of the high lore characters he wants to use for that dime.
Yeah, he did get a Tamatoa. I saw in there. He had that second dime in hand before, so that did get put into the discard pile. But a lot more options here. That he has Ariel. Treasure collector, so he's gonna gain 5 here using Lucky Dime and gaining 5 off of Ariel when she comes down.
And that's really the perfect card to draw into. Even the Tamatoa will require a few more items to get up to that 5 lore total. So being able to gain 5 lore immediately with a dime is great.
Yeah, and with that Ariel on board and not exerted, then because of that ward, which we talked about last time, Rachel's not really going to be able to have an answer for that Ariel, and so she's going to have to win this turn.
I don't think there are any answers there.
Yeah.
There is a double grab your swords line, which is available, except for Cogsworth giving Ariel resist 1, which makes us grab your sword, or makes grab your sword not as good. So as you point out, Steven doesn't even need to quest with Ariel, just wait for the dime and activate that again.
We have an Ariel Spectacular Singer come down, so looking for some songs, which there's only one, Let the Storm Rage On, it looks like, and not probably the song that she wanted to see this turn.
No, there's unfortunately just not a lot of answers here. That Ariel with Ward, that word is such a powerful ability.
It really is, which I feel like I've talked to a lot of new players who don't quite understand how powerful Ward can be, but this is a great example of how that keyword just really can give you such an advantage when you have a card like Ariel that can quest for so much, and it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, and the best word cards are ones like Prince John, which give you some sort of static ability just by being there. And in this case, Ariel doesn't have a static ability. I mean, the one that gives her more lore. But that dime is basically saying 5 lore turn as long as Ariel stays.
As long as Ariel
ready.
stays.
Yeah. So this is a challenge. So Rachel, playing to her outs here, just trying to dig, see if there's anything that comes up that might be able to answer it, but passing the turn here, and then we'll quest with the Ariel for 5 lore and
shake.
Yeah, that's gonna be the game.
Yes. Well, Steven played that Sapphire Steel deck so well.